Yeah, oh no. I, oh,
Did you fall into a hole?
uh, no. Alright, hello and welcome to Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex.
And Alex, as you can see, we are back in Podcast Village. We're here with all of our lovely vendors, just hanging out, seeing what we want to buy. And
Our open air vendors.
I'm going to tell you right now what I've been buying, as you can probably see from over here, is bananas.
Whoa, would you look at all those bananas?
Oh, don't worry, there's going to be more. But in the meantime, there's some bananas. If anybody ever needs bananas, just come to Podcast Village, because as you can see, bananas are everywhere. There's so many. I think that you could, at this point, probably spend all day just going around picking bananas. And
I
think
we could have named
fine.
this Banana Valley.
You could have called this Banana Valley, which would have been a lot of fun. Yeah, today one of the things I have to work on is I've determined that we have a big problem, and the big problem is not enough bananas.
So the problem is, yes, we have no bananas.
Yes, we have no bananas. We need to indeed get more bananas, and so I need to fix that. But that is not actually what the episode is going to be about. Because, as people might be aware, if they had been watching the show recently, we have just completed, at time of this going out, we should have just completed Killer Frequency. And if you have not seen us go through Killer Frequency, I guess go ahead and do that. I don't think we're really spoiling much on this one, but it might give you some context of what happened in the game. But for the people who are not aware, basically, Killer Frequency is a game where you are a radio DJ in the 80s, and there is a killer on the loose, the Whistling Man, and you now have to figure out how to save your callers from getting murdered by the Whistling Man, a task that we mostly achieved. We mostly achieved
it. We got one guy killed.
Of course, we hated him anyway.
He deserved it.
Yeah, I did go back and I put it in the video to show that we did successfully go back later, and I did indeed save one of them. Just so that we could say that we actually saved everybody. But in the initial playthrough, yeah, we lost one. We didn't like him very much, so it wasn't a huge loss, but generally you can, like, save or lose basically everybody in the game, which is very interesting. But one of the things that was really interesting to me, which is the thing that we're really going to be talking about today, is that it was set in a very specific time period in the 80s, using the technology of the time and the setting of the time and the feeling of that time in order to create the atmosphere. And so I thought it would be interesting if we discussed a little bit about how you use different time periods, how games that have used those time periods in order to enhance their overall game. And I guess we can start with Killer Frequency, since that's fresh in the mind.
It's fresh. It's fresh as a summer blossom.
It's killer, like a frequency. So the thing that's really interesting about Killer Frequency is I think we generally had positive things to say about the game, not necessarily that it would be in our general wheelhouse. But that what it did pretty well. And what I liked about it was that it was able to use the idea of being in an 80s radio station in order to take away some of the modern technology that we would normally have available to us. That's very helpful, because the entire time I thought to myself, oh, do you know that if we had, like, the modern conveniences of, like, cell phones and internet service and stuff like that, man, it feels like this would have been far easier to like, communicate over these airwaves, right? It would have been so much simpler. But you don't have that available. You don't have that available.
You do not.
So you have this wonderful thing where when somebody calls you on, like, an intercom in that game, if they're not at the intercom, you can't check a camera system on your phone. You don't have these things available to you, which builds suspense, because there are parts in that game where you really do feel alone and unable to communicate with others. And so that feeling definitely changes your relationship with the game. Great for a, like, horror game, which is, it's not an overt horror game, like people might be thinking, like a survival horror game, but it's definitely going for the atmosphere of it. So the 80s works actually very, very well for that setting. Generally, Alex, I guess I'll ask you, but if it wasn't like that time period, can you think of, like, other games that might actually lend itself to a psychological horror, or some sort of maybe even like liminal space, like we usually talk about?
I think psychological horror, maybe like the 70s or late 60s, where they've also got all the psychedelic drugs going on.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Like if you like if the drugs were making you start thinking about, like, are things really happening, or if your killer or your victims or anything were, like, thinking about that too. That would be interesting.
Is this real? No, it's not real.
There's on that note, actually, there's a game, I don't know if you ever played We Happy Few.
I've seen it played. I haven't played it myself.
Okay. I have always had kind of mixed feelings about We Happy Few, but I think the best thing that it ever did, and Compulsion has done good work in other ways before and since, but the thing that I think it did the best was there are these, like, actual drugs that they used to
the happy pills.
Yeah, which I can't remember what they were actually called. Joy. That's right. It was joy, literally. And the idea is that everybody has to be on the joy because, frankly, this world, if you're not on joy, it looks pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And the mechanic that they use in that game that is very interesting is that if you're on joy, the world looks completely different than if you're not. And people can usually tell if you're not.
No.
Well, the police in the game, the constables, the bobbies, they get suspicious of you because you're acting weird in the game. If you are not properly being joyful, and that becomes like a big talking point, a mechanic in the actual game. So that is also one of those things. They could have made that contemporary, but I think it benefits from not being that way and being set in a period, because it invokes that idea of, like, that whole psychedelic era, and it enhances the game by doing that. So that's one really good example of utilizing that time period. I think when I say something like, a period piece being used for things, people probably think of, like the Victorian era London, like where you had, like, Jack the Ripper, and there's been other games that have played around with that. But I guess since we were doing Killer Frequency recently, I am thinking about, like, more modernistic time periods in the U.S. and which ones work the best for that. 80s nostalgia definitely fuels a good portion of that, which is why it's really interesting to see like what they did with a Kill Frequency.
Yeah.
And like you said, 60s, 70s, that would be interesting. Son of Sam, all of that, you know, that's a good place. But I'm actually kind of surprised that more periods of time from like the 20th century didn't get utilized as much as they could be. Like
For like horror specifically, or
well, you know, I was thinking about different kinds of things, but yeah, actually, why don't we stick on horror for a minute? Think about the Great Depression. You know, I know you don't want to think about the Great Depression, but
yeah, I try not to think about depression.
but Great Depression era, or the Roaring Twenties, you know, or the 50s, you know, those would be actually kind of interesting eras for horror. Actually, the Great Depression seems like that would work pretty well. I think that I think that era, especially in that time of like seeming desperation, would go a long way toward you know, engendering a certain, by its very nature, kind of like a psychological effect on people.
Yeah,
but
I think that's fair.
yeah, but even like the 20s, that anything goes kind of era where
Prohibition.
yeah, Prohibition actually, yeah, that would have been. Now I'm just thinking about games you could make, but if you had a game, maybe yeah, like a psychological horror, but that you are like running a speakeasy and you don't actually know who's providing you with alcohol, and like you get a different driver than you expect, and they're acting very strange, and they deliver like late at night after everybody's gone, and you start wondering what happened to the other guy that you knew, and then there's like a different guy after that. You're wondering like, okay, so what's happening here? Is this a sting? Is this are they setting me up? What's happening?
So we're just playing a paranoia game. Got it.
We're playing a paranoia game. We're playing oh, what was that called that I played? There was like an empire building game where you built like your mafia. Oh, I think it was called Mafia Empire.
Great. What a name.
Yeah. It probably wasn't called that now that I think about it. It was probably something smarter than I'm making it out to be. But I think of it as Mafia Empire. It was a top-down game where you had like strategic combat. That was kind of XCOM. Like that was what they were going for.
Are you thinking of Syndicate?
Oh, maybe I was. Yeah. I might have been thinking about the Syndicate. That was also one where you have to take over businesses, and then you have to like navigate the era of the time, trying to figure out like, are you gonna like bribe the police? Are you going to like be confrontational with them? Like what are you actually gonna try to achieve here? And I found that to be a really interesting mechanic. Although the game is, to just, I guess, small tangent, it's not as good as XCOM. So, I don't know if I'd normally recommend it. But it's a good time period for that kind of a game. I think it could also be a good kind of time period, though, for a psychological horror. Because, like, what's your hallmarks for like a horror game is you want to feel some kind of isolation, you want to feel some kind of an unease with the world around you. There has to be some kind of like confusion to the world, something that is outside of the norm. And I think that, the idea of having to be paranoid a little bit anyway, that you're doing something illegal that's getting cracked down on, and that you would have very literal isolation would be kind of a match made in heaven for that kind of a game. And then the other one that I was talking about was, the Great Depression. Also, same thing. Same general idea, is that you're not dealing with necessarily prohibition, but there's a certain isolation and a desperation to that era, too, where there could be a stranger who is also desperate, and you don't know their intentions, and from that leads the whole story. You might, without actually giving away anything for Killer Frequency, you could practically do the same story. Set in Depression era. You wouldn't be necessarily like a radio host. Maybe you're an on-the-ground reporter, and you're investigating, or you're reporting on a series of murders around the city, and you could do something similar. Maybe the Whistling Man is back then too.
Maybe.
That would be a possibility, and I think that might work. It would play different, because something that I thought was interesting about Killer Frequency was the idea that the game basically has to take place entirely in that radio station. So you're not really on the ground, and you're getting the updates on what's happening pretty much through your callers who are calling into the show. What I'm talking about, though, with my Great Depression era serial killer horror game, which is totally what I'm just going to call it now, is you would have to go out onto the streets. Like, that map that they gave you in the game would have to be a map that you actually physically explore and go around on. And I'm trying to think, maybe you could give me the advice, but do you think that it's scarier the way that they did in Killer Frequency, where you're isolated to this one area of a map while stuff is happening all over the place, or where you would be out in the streets unaware of what's around the corner? What do you think works better for a horror game?
I think it's better when you're out experiencing the horror.
Yeah.
But I think for the purpose of what they were doing, it makes more sense to
Sure.
do it the way they did, because you're then kind of powerless.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that the way they did it for that particular game works great, but it probably would be more unnerving to actually be out on the streets if they had made a fully realized version of that town. Because the openness of areas is unnerving.
It can be.
It can be.
But that's the whole thing. It's like they built it up as you are in the station and you can't really leave, and also you don't want to leave. There's a killer on the loose.
Right. And it becomes the thing though that they do that is interesting is that there is a constant sense that the killer might be closer to you at any point in the storyline. And I think that's how it builds up a lot of its tension and its horror vibes, is that, yes, you're on the phone with callers, and so you kind of know that they're dealing with this right now, and they're not right around the corner. But in those periods between, sometimes when, nothing specifically is happening, I thought that those actually had a tension, because it's okay, but where is the Whistling Man now? Is he right around the corner? And that also lends back to the idea of time period being really useful. Because you know that if it was the modern era, everybody would have their cell phones out. And they'd be going like, yo, saw a whistling man down here on the corner of Romero Street. Hashtag whistling. And then they'd be like trying to take selfies with the whistling man.
As they do.
As they do, yeah, absolutely. And they'd be like trying to get him to do like the planking challenge or whatever was cool at the time. And it wouldn't be scary. It's like I hate to say it, but it's got to be hard being a serial killer in the modern era. You know, you think about it. Everybody's watching you, and you have to keep up those clicks. You have to keep up likes. You gotta farm engagement. It's got to be a hassle. I'm just saying, I don't recommend anybody become a serial killer in the modern era. It just seems like more trouble than it's worth. That's my takeaway. Yeah, I think that's really the takeaway. So the further back you go, the less technology you have available to you. But also, I think there's an interesting thing with the antiquation of the world itself, the look of those worlds, and that it kind of teleports you to a different time and place that is both familiar because you remember it from history books, and you've seen things that are old, so it's at least referential for you, but at the same time feels very much out of place. And there's almost, whenever you see period pieces, or at least when I see period pieces, there is a certain dreamlike quality to them for the fact that you're literally going to a different time. It's not it's not fantastical in the same way, it's grounded, but it is very much a different place. It doesn't feel real because it feels like it's out of time. So I can see how they can utilize that really well for a horror game, or really any kind of game for that matter. But if you could take the 80s aesthetic, since I think we can loop to that for just a second, though. If you were to take the 80s aesthetic, what kind of games would you say could work for, more specifically, the 80s? A time period we only knew as children. So
I mean,
small kids.
In like general, or are we sticking with the horror vibe still?
Well, if it wasn't horror, if it was some other kind of genre, would you be going like? I've played one or two that were like RPGs that tried to use that. I've seen some kind of like adventure-y games that use that kind of thing. Narrative-focused stuff is usually okay, but maybe just the aesthetics of it. You could do like maybe survival crafting, possibly. Make transistor radios and stuff. Shortwave ham radios.
I wouldn't use those, but
you wouldn't use those. Here's another one that was actually set in the 80s, to give you a little contrast, was Firewatch.
Was it set in the 80s?
Yeah. It was, I think it was the late 80s that it was set in. But, yeah. The Firewatch was. At some point, maybe we have to play Firewatch just so I can lead you through it. It's not a very long game. And that also has a sense of isolation.
I've seen it played. I just...
Oh, okay. It's an interesting one. But yeah, he was specifically going out to be on Firewatch to kind of like get away from the troubles in the city. And one of the reasons why he couldn't just immediately like call up his wife or anything was because he didn't have that technology out there. It was in complete isolation. He didn't have a phone or any outside communication, basically.
Can't believe it.
And it was in the 80s. So he had like a radio in the tower, but he didn't have, and he had a walkie-talkie, if you might recall. He had like one of the big old walkie-talkies so that they could talk back and forth. But I think that's also the reason why Campo Santo set that in the 80s, so that they had that level of technology available to them. Anything?
I think a game that used like the vaporwave aesthetic would look cool. Set in like the 70s or 80s, probably the 80s.
Yeah.
Early 90s maybe.
Vaporwave definitely has that 80s appeal.
Which also would be great for liminal space as well.
It would. It would. I can also see them doing something similar to, like, Cyberpunk, but with, like, that era. Because, again, that also feels very much in the vein of, like, an 80s kind of thing. Every time I see Cyberpunk, I think it's, like, what the 80s would have thought of modern-day technology in a lot of ways. But yeah, that whole synthy neon glow look to things definitely has a visual style to it that's hard to that's very easy to recognize is I guess the way I want to put it. And you could use that for a wide variety of things. But the thing that I thought was kind of odd is that there's also a bit of suspension of disbelief here. I think I mentioned it when we were playing the game, but there are points where it feels like, maybe because of how the game had to run for the narrative, but they also go against what the level of technology was at the time in certain cases. Like, you'll remember there are points where people are talking to you.
Yeah.
Where I don't know how they had access to a phone. I just don't know.
Like in the middle of a corn maze?
In the middle of the corn maze, yeah. It's like, I don't... How? There are points where there are people that are, like, out on the street, and they're talking to you on some kind of a phone device, and I guess, like, in the 80s, they had that, but it was very uncommon. And then sometimes I would say, well, they might have been at payphones, phone booths.
Not in the corn maze.
But not in the corn maze, and also, it becomes pretty obvious in a lot of those scenarios that, like, I don't know, like, they would have had to be suspiciously close to a payphone in order to, like, be in this situation. Like, and especially when there was mobility involved and people had to be, like, moving from one place to another.
They're just dragging the payphone with them.
They're just dragging the payphone with them. There were a couple cases, and again, I don't want to get too specific if people want to go back and listen to it, but there were a couple cases where they tried to give in-game reasons for why that happened. And I did appreciate it, but there were some times where it feels like it was very hand-wavy. Because you do have these limitations to setting something in a time period where it starts to get in the way of trying to tell your story. I could set something as a really interesting narrative back in the days of the caveman. But there is going to be a point where I'm going to get into the mechanics and kind of go, oh, man, I feel very limited by the level of technology available to me and the resources that are easily acquirable. How am I going to get steel? Oh, that's actually something that you see a lot in survival crafting, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like, there's realistically, those crafting stations that you build, you can't make steel. Like, we're in Minecraft right now. You should not be able to just make steel bars with this stuff that you're finding.
Well, sure you can. You get iron and you refine it. You add carbon.
Yeah, but, like, that's a pretty simplified process for what we're doing here, right?
Sure, it's simplified, but, like, it's the beginning process. I do. We're not talking about survival crafting today, but I do want to say that some of these survival crafting games are a bit wild. Where we talked about this last time, where you go from yes, I'm mining copper with the pickaxe to yes, I've created a factory and I'm making industrial steel.
Yeah, yeah. You're making industrial steel. Oh, look, I've created antimatter. Isn't that amazing? I've invented new atoms and elements and stuff like that. Yeah.
I've invented fusion.
And if you were doing like a sci-fi thing, and you wanted to do like the period piece, something like Dr. Frankenstein might work okay for that. Again, we're going back to, antiquity of London, or at least what would that be? Victorian era, probably. I think that Frankenstein was Victorian era London. Something like that, if you had some supernatural qualities to it, might work out okay. But yeah, I don't know if it never made a lot of sense to me, like how you go from point A to point B in quite that succession. But there are some games, I guess, on that topic. There are some games where I suppose they'd work. Actually, survival crafting games. As I organize my thoughts, survival crafting games actually, in a lot of ways, wouldn't necessarily get affected all that much by time periods. Because you're already starting with the primal landscape that's around you. I think of like Green Hell, and I don't think Green Hell would have
as you
really...
often do.
I often do think about Green Hell, trust me. But I don't know if that would have really changed all that much, regardless of what time period it was set in. Because you start out in the middle of the woods, or in the middle of an island, and things don't really get better from there. Even the most, like, modern-day technology that you get isn't particularly modern, except for a few items that you scavenge, but that could easily be retrofit. So I don't think it would really change the gameplay very much when you're already out of time and place. I mostly think about the idea that if you were to take a place you're familiar with, like a town that you're familiar with, and you were to set it in a different time period that you already are not familiar with, that you didn't grow up in, it would be a really good way to lend itself to a horror or even to a liminal space, because we play quite a few of those liminal space games. And I think this is why a game that we have not brought up, I believe, yet, Anemoiopolis, is kind of centered around the idea of this 80s mall. Because it is a time out of place. And Anemoiopolis, that's another one that we have played on the show, and I will not spoil what happens to that game. But it becomes pretty easy to see immediately that while set... I think it's actually set in modern era. I think it's supposed to be modern.
It might be. I'm not really sure.
I think it is, but regardless of whether it is or not, the world that it builds is supposed to feel like it's from a bygone era. Especially like with the mall setting and the aesthetics of like the movie theater part and everything like that. Those look very, very 80s, and even the name itself spawns from Anemoia, which is a yearning. If I remember the description, it's a yearning for a time and place that you did not personally experience.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I say I think it is set in the modern day. Because this place that your character has been transported into is not familiar to them. Does not look like a place that they know.
Doesn't look like a friendly place.
Nor is it. And so, again, this starts to feel very different and very ethereal or dreamlike, like I was talking about before. I don't know. Do you have ideas about like what other time periods? If we'll stick to the liminal spaces or the psychological horror genre, stuff that we would normally play on the game. Play on the game?
Play on the game.
Yes, we are playing on the game. Stuff we would normally play on the show.
There's a fun one I've seen recently, which is Routine. If you've seen anything about that.
I've seen a little bit about it, but I guess I didn't really research it very much.
Yeah,
What is it?
It is a NASA punk kind of game.
Oh,
It's taking
NASA punk.
space, clean space. So if you take like Starfield aesthetics,
Yeah.
that whole NASA punk or space punk or whatever,
yeah.
and then you add some horror elements into it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Alien.
I've never actually watched the Alien movies.
Okay, but like the look of Alien from
Yeah,
the 70s has that aesthetic too. And that also takes its cue from being very much about isolation. So, yeah, no, I haven't really looked into Routine, so I don't know much about it, but that looks interesting though.
So stuff like that.
Something like that. Okay. I'm trying to think like what time period they'd be invoking with that. Would that probably be like 60s era? I guess NASA punk.
I mean, it
probably
really
set in that.
it really depends on what you want to do, because you could do a
Okay.
lot with space stuff. Anything
sure.
from the 60s onwards would really be appropriate. So
Right. There's also the interesting thing about space. In that time period, and I think this is the reason why there were a lot of like horror kind of movies of the time that were set in space, is that you, by its very nature, you have isolation in there. There is this giant cold void around you that's like just outside this barrier. Just outside this wall, there is an endless void. And as I think they said in the tagline of Alien, in space nobody can hear you scream. No one can hear you scream. And so there is something that, even if there wasn't a xenomorph on that station, that's still pretty terrifying from a psychological aspect. That has to do a number on you when you're just floating out there in a tin can in the middle of nothing. And so there's something that lends itself really well to horror anyway by doing that. The game that I think of immediately, since I guess that's kind of what we were talking about, was Alien Isolation, because they actually did use that setting to do a horror game that was, I guess you'd say that Isolation was a horror survival game. I want to say it was.
yeah, I think so.
You're definitely trying to survive.
It's definitely horror.
Yeah, you're not doing a very good job of it most of the time. At least the way I played. That is one of the ones, small tangent. I have considered trying to play Isolation again. That seems like one of the ones that I occasionally feel I gave up on too quickly. Because I probably was 3 hours into the game, and I think the xenomorph had just shown itself, but I hadn't really gotten to the part where you actually have to deal with it. And I think the reason I stopped playing was because I got frustrated. It wasn't that I was scared, it was that I was frustrated by some of the sections in like the run back, where the androids would just, like, catch you, and then you'd be dead. And then the save point is, like, a large section away from where you had gotten to. I'll just give you the story real quick since we're here.
Sure.
So, point in that game, it's an older game, I'm not giving much away. I don't want to give too much away. But, there's a point where you start to see a xenomorph. Spoiler, I guess, there's xenomorphs in an Alien game. Anyway, you see the xenomorph, you've been dealing with basically some pirates and these androids in the game up to this point. That's basically what you've been dealing with, and both of them are annoying. There's a bunch of pirates, they fire guns at you, not great. And then you have the androids, and the androids basically come up to you, they grab you, and it takes very little for you to die in that game. And so then it's like, okay, well, I gotta worry about these androids that are all over the place. They introduce the xenomorph, they show you xenomorph, and they're like, you've got to go to this other place. And in order to do that, you have to go through this pretty big section of the game. You gotta backtrack through a bunch of hallways, and there's enemies there, and the xenomorph is, you know, luckily dealing with a lot of those pirates that you had to deal with before, or sneak past. Like, that kind of takes care of one of your problems. But it becomes basically a stealth section, because, you know, it's not just a xenomorph that you're going through, you're trying to also deal with all of these pirates. You don't want them to catch you either. So, you get through this huge section, there's no place to save. And you have to transition to another area of the game. You go there, I can see, like, where my objective is, and then I'll be able to save. I'm low on health. Things have not gone terribly well. But, you know, I can see the point where I have to go. I see the door. And as I get into this new area, an android that's just, like, looked like it was dead on the ground, springs to life, grabs my ankle, kills me, and then, I have to reload my game, and I'm at the beginning of that long stealth section that I had to go through multiple areas to get to.
Nice.
And I was like, well, I'm done. That was the point where I was like, well, I think I'm gonna just not do this anymore, because I've been in this game for like 3 hours. I haven't really even gotten to the meat of the game, and now I'm gonna have to do a whole run back, and it is very annoying for me. So I gave up on Alien Isolation for that reason.
Fair enough.
But I do feel like if you don't get bogged down in those things where it's like, oh yeah, that was the other thing that frustrated me about. Now this is just me ranting about Alien Isolation, apparently. But there was a point in that game where you start to deal with these stupid androids. And I'm just going to call them the stupid androids from now on. I know they're called something else. Synths? Something like that.
That's Fallout.
Maybe that's Fallout. I don't know. I think it's also Alien. Whatever. Anyway, the point is you're starting to deal with these guys. And it makes no sense how durable they are. Like, you get a revolver, and this thing looks like a Taurus, like, revolver. It's like supposed to be a heavy pistol. And you have to shoot an android, like, 4 times in the head to make the android deactivate. You know, not be around anymore. Let's put it that way. If I want to eliminate Android from my equation. And it just... it's... With the amount of ammunition that you get, it's like, well, this is not going to be a solvable solution. And it just takes so much. They find you everywhere. And I tried to hide in closets and stuff, and they find you immediately. And it's like, well, you're gonna bog me down so much with these freaking androids that I'm trying to deal with. am I ever even going to get to the point where the xenomorph has to get in there? Because I wanted to see the interesting mechanics they did for that. Because there are, if you're not familiar with it, the xenomorph in that game actually has 2 completely different sets of AI for the
for when it's stalking and when it's
well
doing whatever.
one is for the mobility of the alien queen, I want to say. Like, one is for, like, the actual mobility of the alien, and then the other one is, like, for the learning algorithm of the alien. So there's, like, 2 completely different systems that also, like, evolve differently as you go through it to learn your patterns, and you also have to learn their patterns. So it's... I wanted to see how that played out. That was, like, a mechanic that I thought would be very interesting. But, I, like, never freaking got to it because they bog you down with so much crap at the beginning of the game with other enemies that are not the alien. And so, and so, yeah. But, anyway, I think Rant achieved on Alien Isolation. Still, I think that if I were to go back to it now, it might be a little bit different. I might feel a little bit different about it if I tried it again, because especially since we've been playing a lot more in, like, psychological horror and in those games that create tension. I think that it might hit differently for me now than it did before. I don't know, but I'm gonna say it's possible. So who knows? If there are any people out there who say that they'd like me to try it, maybe I will. But I have a backlog of other things to play too. I'm also actually kind of curious if anybody has... We've been talking about different time periods and how you could set games that are, like, atmospheric, psychological horror kind of games in there. It's possible that they exist. If they do exist, please just let me know, because they might be something that I want to check out. I doubt, though, that, like, Depression-era horror simulator is something that they've done yet.
Maybe not specifically with that name.
No. But you know what I mean, just the general setting of things. What would be the ideal era for, like, a psychological horror game?
Man. 2020s.
So basically modern.
Yeah, just COVID.
Just now. Oh,
you could do
yeah. During, like, the lockdowns and...
Yeah. You do the, where the world's empty, but it's actually empty.
Oh, it's actually empty. Oh, everybody's gone to the rapture.
Kinda, yeah. Except in modern.
Yeah. Ooh, you came across a whole new variant of COVID, but it actually, like, turns you into, like, The Last of Us, spore zombies.
Oh,
And then, but you're locked down because everybody's like, oh, but COVID, and they're like, no. But I mean, like, a different variant. Yeah. We already know about, like, Omicron. No. You don't get this. No. I mean, I'm getting stalked by, like, a feral creature that's on something else. And then maybe it's like, oh, well, that's a different thing entirely. And then, like, what's that about? And then the person who's stalking you could end up being sort of like the xenomorph. And then you have to, like, crawl through the corridors in your apartment building or whatever. Try to figure out if anybody else is even still around. But
they're all gone. They're all gone to the rapture.
You know, if you wanted to set this a little bit further back just so that you have some distance from it, you could do, like, Plague Era. Actually, I guess that's kind of like what well, Pathologic it also takes place, like, in a plague. But yeah, what's that game? Oh yeah, Plague Tale. Yeah, Plague Tale actually takes place during the plague. That's true. If you play that first game better than the other game, just for the record. There's another one that I have on my wish list that's I think called Plague 1866. I want to say is the date, which feels a little bit more like. It's a little bit more like a Stardew Valley kind of thing, but you're a plague doctor that gets to a town that's been inflicted, and you have to see if you can save everybody from this plague that's taken the town as the doctor. I kind of think of it, or at least the way it looks, is like a possibly a more engaging version of Graveyard Keeper.
Oh, good.
Which would be, if I play it, I guess I'll report back and tell you, because I know that you'd be interested to know if there was a more engaging version of Graveyard Keeper.
There's definitely a more engaging version somewhere.
Sure, certainly. So yeah, you could take that idea of being like under a quarantine and using that as isolation. I feel like a lot of people kind of went through their own version of psychological horror during that time because of the isolation. But you could set it in another time period too, and it would be interesting because, you think about like Spanish flu or when they had the Black Plague and something like that, and you're like, having gone through COVID, my God, that must have sucked so bad, because at least we had, like, television and phones, and you could, like, communicate and keep in touch with people, and you could watch stuff, and you had, like, readily available shops where you could buy food. And, like, you think back to, like, what it must have been like in the 1800s when they had to deal with that. That must have been such... That must have been horrible. I can't imagine how horrible that must have been. Where, like, if you had to go to market, it could take you, like, a day. And then you can't communicate with your family before you get home. It was like, you don't know if they're okay at all. If you have to go away, you're just away. There's no way to communicate with them. Come to think of it, I think I mentioned it to you, but I guess side promo. There's a series that I was doing over on Titanium Line. It's called Overly Demotional, and it's just basically a series where I'm playing different game demos that looked interesting to me. One of them is a period piece, and it's called Seance of Blake Manor. And the idea is that you are a detective, and you get summoned to this manor where they are going.
It's Blake Manor.
It is Blake Manor, and you are summoned to this Blake Manor for the purposes of figuring out, like, what happened to this person who has disappeared. And there are guests there because they are going to do this seance. And the seance itself is, they tout it as being a real seance where they are actually going to contact the dead. And so there's, like, supernatural elements to it. But this is like Ireland in, did they say, like, 1860s, something like that? And so you get this letter, but you also don't have, like, ways to contact the outside world once you get to the manor, realistically. And there's this time mechanic of, like, analyzing things, where, like, a minute passes by when you observe things. And so then you only have, like, a limited time frame of, like, an hour to figure out this thing. And then, talk to different people and determine what information you want to actually engage with. But that's also set into this time period before the age of like mass communication. But it's set as a mystery that also has kind of horror elements to it, where you're investigating this almost supernatural thing that's happening at that time. And it was a very interesting demo. I actually had to stop before I finished the entirety of the demo because it was very long, longer than I expected. Mostly because I think if I go back and play it, I'll try to play the whole thing. I think I originally said that it looked like the love child of like Blueprints and Shadows of Doubt, because it is a detective one where you're trying to piece together information and evidence like you would in a Shadows of Doubt, but the way it's presented to you when you see Blake Manor, it looked like Mount Holly from the outside, but with like a goth like palette over it of like this grayscale. So it really reminded me immediately in the art style and what they were doing. It looked a lot like Blueprints. It definitely had that feel, but it also kind of reminded me of like Shadows of Doubt with puzzly elements. So Botany Manor also made me. I thought of that too. But generally, I think that the time period lended itself very well to that because one, you get to see this manor that's all decked out in like that 1800s look. You know, it doesn't look modernistic. It has this really nice style to it, and they can play around with that. But then also because of what people might have seen of as like the fears of the occult and these the situation that they're in at that time lends itself very well to the mystery part of this. Because as far as your character, Mr. Ward, is concerned, Detective Ward, who knows? This stuff could be real. He thinks it's all about charlatans, but it might be real. And then you start to get ideas that maybe there is something to it, and you didn't realize it at the time. So, yeah, there's some interesting stuff, and you wouldn't have been able to do that if it was in a modern setting. You just would not have gotten that experience from a game that was set in the modern era. You couldn't have done that game in Blueprints, because it's a different kind of game as a mystery, rather than a puzzle. Although, to be fair to Blueprints, it had a certain unsettling quality to it for a different reason. Like, there were mysteries aplenty in a different way. But for what they wanted to do with Seance of Blake Manor, it makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, I think that there's definitely some stuff that you can do, not just with liminal spaces, not just with psychological horror, but also with mysteries, where it makes sense. That's why they make all of those Sherlock Holmes games. You know, just...
They do make a few of those.
I think I have some of them. I know I have some of them. I don't know if I played them.
Oh, yeah.
But I do have some. But anyway, any other time periods before we finish?
I mean, you could really do almost any time period you want.
Sure.
As long as it's interesting.
Yeah. I think one of the things that might help, this is definitely something that would help, is it would have to be a time period that the creators were personally interested in. Don't have to necessarily lived in that era, but it has to be one that you're particularly interested in. For instance, if we go way back to the old show, we had a guest on. I don't think you were there for this one.
Oh, Capers, yeah.
Was it Capers? Oh, well, oh, yeah. That wasn't even the one I was thinking about.
Oh, that's one
but
I thought you were thinking of.
You're right, though. Capers is a good example. But, there was another guest. I'm not going to remember who it is. It's been so many years.
What's the game?
The game was. You're going to make me remember the name of the game. The game. I don't remember the name of the game. I do remember, however, that it was about. It was RPGs that were set as mysteries that were from different time periods through history. And I'm going to blank on the name. I believe that the company was it Caliber Games that did it. But he was like he had been in the military, but he was very interested in these different eras and time periods in history. One of them was a story about a mystery that was on a submarine that had gone down. This was the more modernistic one, but the communications were off. And you have like a petty officer that is on this ship, and there's been a murder. And now they have to figure out how, like, what happened on it. And it was set as like an RPG that you would discover the mysteries by being like people on the ship. A murder has occurred. You have no communication to the outside world. You're in a submarine that's basically stranded in the middle of the ocean, submerged. What do you do? And then the other one that I thought was really, really interesting, one that I keep like in the back of my head to this day, is that he had also talked to me about the city of Cahokia, which is, as I found out, a very real place that existed before like colonists from Europe came over. It was a native city. They don't even know what tribe of natives built it, because by the time the Europeans got there, they looked around. There were people there, and they said, "Hey, who built these giant earthen mounds?" Because they had literally built something akin to the pyramids, or the ziggurats. They had built this. And they asked the natives that were there, and they're like, "We don't know. We found these here. We don't know who built them." So we actually have no idea. But there was, he basically set like a murder mystery in this earthen mound city of Cahokia. And so that lends itself to another time and place that is interesting, that people might not know about, but that also kind of has a mystery all of its own about what that place was to begin with. So the place is a mystery, and then you set a murder mystery inside of it, and that kind of like amplifies the overall like tension of that place. So yeah, do you think, like, I don't know. Is it better to use a setting that, like, you grew up in, or is it better to use a setting that is more removed from you? 'Cause
I think more removed, because then you get that feeling of anemoia.
That's true. That's true. You do get the anemoia of that world. Very true. Astute observation, Alex. I'm going to give you credit for that. Never be afraid to complain about stuff. That's like the number one export that we have in this country, is complaining. However, Alex, I guess it's probably about that time. We should probably talk a little bit about where people could go on the internet if they wanted to find more information about Total Pebble Knockdown.
Are you going to say delve because we were talking about delve?
Yes, we're going to... Yes, sorry. It's Delve. You're going to go to delve.com, and nothing is going to be there.
Yeah, pretty
so enjoy that. But if not that, though, where else could they go?
You can also go to totalpebbleknockdown.com, where we have all our stuff posted. It's a little splash page if you need any help finding out where the fuck we are.
Yep.
You can also go to our friendly little Discord server and our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yeah. You could do that. It would be pretty sweet of you if you did. Because, you know, we talk about a lot of stuff over there. It's a public Discord. So, you know, you can join us. If you're nice, maybe we'll let you stay.
If you're not nice,
and
we'll
if you're
stay too.
if if it's if you're a real annoyance, well, you'll stay for a small amount of time. And that would also be okay. But we're usually pretty good about having people in. It's okay. Fight in the comments. It's fine. Yeah, I think that it would be great for you to come over there. As you probably gathered, you're not really going to find us with much of a social media presence outside of that. But yeah, Discord and over here on YouTube. If you wanted to find more videos just like this, and that'd be great. Yeah. Oh no. Oh.
Did you fall into a hole?
No. There was. I'm just in the village, and a creeper came up and exploded on me.
Oh.
Where did you come from?
I came from my little cave entrance, I guess.
Oh, I should probably do something about that. However, that's not so important for this moment in time, because what we really should do is talk to everybody about how they have been a lovely audience, and that we want to thank them for coming on by, saying hello, telling us all of the things, which they did. I'm just going to say they did do that.
They definitely did.
You did that, and we appreciate that. We appreciate you for sticking with us over all this time, which, you know, if you think about it, is sort of like a time-ish thing, right?
Sure.
It's kind of time-related. Sure.
Sure.
By the way, we were talking about time on this episode of the show, so this makes perfect sense so far. But for Alex and me, I should say that I want to thank you for coming and stopping by. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the next one, which will be in a time period in the future as well. And hopefully, we're going to be talking about something else. Next episode, I don't know. We might talk about something more specific.
Maybe.
I think we might talk about a more specific game. I have a feeling there might be one. It will not necessarily be Minecraft, but we will talk about something more specific. But until that point, folks, I want to thank you for stopping by, and we will see you on the next episode. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye.